we welcome all of the audience and all of the festival documentary filmmakers here who meet in memory of our beloved D.A. Pennebaker, or Penny as we hold him in our hearts. This special Pennebaker Career Achievement Award carries with it the pioneering spirit of Penny's talent and bold efforts that went beyond the limits of the fixed camera to give all of us the observational camera. So this breakthrough allowed filmmakers a new freedom, an intimate perspective. I just want even the young filmmakers coming up, documentary filmmakers, to really know the roots of that. We selected a clip from Joan Churchill's short film that just debuted at Doc NYC and that we're screening later in the festival. It's entitled Shoot from the Heart. I think it's 16-minute short. But it's centered around a rollicking evening with esteemed filmmakers Haskell Wexler, Chris Hedges, Penny, Joan Churchill. I think Penny Chris shot this, I think. In it, you'll hear straight from the horse's mouth what Penny believed, what he saw, and what he lived by. So if we could run that 1-minute clip, that would be great.
The way I solve the problem is I don't think at all. And that sounds crazy, but when I get into the camera, I don't think. I'm like a cat watching a room full of people. I don't, and when people say, well, how do you decide? I don't decide anything. I'm in there floating in that camera, just watching what goes on. And sometimes I feel a little guilty that I don't take responsibility. It's like the painter who doesn't look at the canvas when he paints. But it has a lot of that. But I think that that's the way I protect myself from some aspect of what you're talking about, which is controlling.
So that says it all. And Penny was a wise person who shot from his heart. So moving along, we have several pieces to tonight's program. We're grateful indeed to Chris Hedges, Penny's film partner and soulmate, and to the entire Pennebaker family, some of whom are here, for allowing us to share this unforgettable documentarian on whose shoulders we stand. One such filmmaker is Dawn Porter, who is receiving the 2021 Pennebaker Career Achievement Award tonight, sponsored and supported by our own Lana Jokel, a documentary filmmaker whose career began when she interned at the Pennebaker Studios over 50 years ago now. And we're grateful for Lana's loyal and continued support. But now let me introduce Chris, who will tell you more about her colleague and good friend, Dawn Porter. So, Chris, it's up to you now.
Welcome, everyone, including Fraser Pennebaker and Lindley Pennebaker here, who are Penny's children and Sag Harbor residents as well. It's always nice to see those clips of Penny because he always says something different every time, so keeps you on your toes. But I'm really happy to be here in this cinema, this new cinema in the village that Penny loves so much and lived here for 60 years probably himself, and he would be so honored to know that this award is being given in this cinema. But tonight, really, I want to introduce Dawn Porter, who is the recipient of this year's Pennebaker Career Award, and somebody who I've admired from the start of her career. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit like deja vu, and I don't know if you remember this, Dawn, but I actually gave you the an award at Doc NYC, the Robert Drew Award, about 6 years ago. And it was to a mid-career filmmaker who excels in observational filmmaking, carrying on the cinema verite tradition. And what I think a lot of people don't know is that Penny actually started his career with Robert Drew. So I feel a little bit like, everything is kind of going full circle in some way. And it seems right that you'll also get the Pennebaker Award. But what I also remember is I distinctly remember the first time Penny and I watched one of Dawn's films, Gideon's Army, and it kind of came in a bundle of DVDs that we get every season this time of year from the Academy to watch. And sorry, I have to keep turning my pages here. Gideon's Army is set in the Deep South, and it takes us behind the scenes into the lives of 3 young black public defenders and the accused victims they represent. And it's a really powerful story, and it shines a light on a totally flawed legal system stacked against the defenseless and the poor, and most often people of color. And after we finished watching it, I remember Penny and I turned to each other and said, "Wow, who is Dawn Porter?" And shortly after that, we really got to know who Dawn Porter was. And it made sense that she made this film because Dawn started her career as an attorney. And I think it's not surprising that so many of her films are about focusing on justice in our society. And her next film, which is an incredibly timely film, Trapped, followed the controversial battle over the trap laws, which are intended to circumvent Roe versus Wade. And again, we watch through the eyes of the doctors and clinical workers who desperately try to keep their facilities open despite a continuing barrage of bogus legal restrictions. But we also see the whole fight through the eyes of a stalwart group of lawyers who fight the case and take it up to the highest courts. And this film kind of went on to win a special jury prize at Sundance and also a Peabody Award. And right now, what's going on in our country, this film is incredibly timely to see again, and the trajectory of where we've gotten to. Dawn's next, her debut Netflix series, Bobby Kennedy for President, explored the passion and evolution and priorities of the man who never got to become president and fulfill his dream. But along with an incredible wealth of archival material and interviews, Dawn also uses some footage that Pennebaker shot of Robert Kennedy, intended for a film he wanted to do on Robert Kennedy running for president. Sadly, he did not get to make that film either, but it became the inspiration for our film, The War Room. But I also remember the start of COVID, when we were all hunkering down in front of our TVs, watching Dawn's film on John Lewis, Good Trouble, which is an incredible film about John Lewis, who was a key figure in the civil rights struggle, along with Martin Luther King, and was a force for justice in Congress throughout a very long career. And the wonderful thing about this film with Dawn, although it uses a lot of archival footage, she got to spend time with John Lewis, and he's just one of the most wonderful, human, funny people, and so missed in this country that we don't have people like John Lewis in Congress anymore. But if that wasn't enough, the same year she also put out The Way I See It, which was an intimate look at the White House photographer Pete Sousa, who was the photographer both for President Reagan and for Obama. And then last summer, for Apple TV, she had a series on mental health and emotional wellness made in collaboration with Oprah Winfrey and Prince Henry, as well as for Nat Geo, Rise Again, Tulsa and the Red Storm, which I have not seen yet. But, these are just some of the things that Dawn has been working on. And so I kind of asked myself if Dawn has cloned herself or if she's actually the busiest filmmaker around. But kidding aside, I think you'll agree that Dawn is awesome. I'm so happy that she's joined us here in Sag Harbor. And I think we're going to show some clips of some of her films and have a conversation. So thank you, Dawn.
Raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
When you work as a public defender, you say to somebody, oh, I'm a public defender, and then they're like, well, what does that mean? I defend people who are charged with committing crimes. And then they'll say, how can you defend those people? I tell them the truth. It's about the sanctity of human liberty and the cost of it if you want to take it.
They have the gall to say that this is not a big case. There are huge consequences. You want to take my liberty, you gotta do it right. And if you don't, acquit.
All right.
I don't see how you can do this work for any period of time and not begin to love it. Either this is your cause or this ain't.
In the past 3 years, there have been hundreds of restrictions passed, more than in the past decade.
These rules don't add anything to the safety of women.
This is our pharmacy. The drugs always expire because we never use them. I don't know that we've ever used any of these things in this clinic ever.
Pete was with the president all the time.
Unlike his predecessor, Mr. Trump does not allow his staff photographer to capture photographs of life and work inside the White House.
If you just stacked up the images of the Obama presidency and the Trump presidency, you would see the two stories of America in the starkest possible contrast.
The job of the chief official White House photographer is to make authentic photographs.
Photographs break down the idea that these people are somehow different from us.
I've got an idea for another picture. Did you get that piece?
Yeah. The first time that we went to the UN, he and Reggie Love played basketball. At one point, President Obama blocks Reggie's shot, and he goes, did you get that block? When Barack Obama was elected, I could see what he meant to the African-American community. This 5-year-old kid asked Obama, is my haircut just like yours? President Obama bent over and let that kid touch his head and his hand.
That image stands for how kids will see themselves differently forever.
I thought, who is this man? How does he deal with crisis? Leadership, character, and empathy. Don't you wish we had that now?
When I first met Pete, his politics were not at all evident. Pete changed. He could no longer be this fly on the wall.
People that acknowledge their mental health struggles, they're really like superheroes.
I just froze and in front of us is a human being who's suffering. Treating people with dignity is the first act. I think it's our natural state to be connected.
Fauzi and his friends are heroes. I really, truly believe that they are heroes.
The results of this year will be felt for decades. For kids, families, husbands, wives, everybody.
I cannot imagine that there are mass graves somewhere in our community and we didn't try to find them.
They're buried somewhere, and the question is where?
We have encountered human remains.
It was like they had found people who had been disappeared by history. The earth had unleashed the truth.
We view this as a murder investigation.
Robert Kennedy's self-confidence came from his family.
From Ethel emerged a moral center. Unlike most guys with his power, he was a great father.
I think makes it worthwhile is you make the right kind of an effort. You can have an effect on their lives.
The Kennedys were in the middle of a transitional moment for America.
He had learned you didn't do things that you weren't going to win. But the new politics said you do the cause, whether you win or not.
My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something. Get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble.
He was always different than every member of Congress. Everybody knew what he had done. He was John Lewis.
We're marching today to dramatize to the world that hundreds and thousands of Negro citizens denied the right to vote.
Congressman Lewis gave us the blueprint to organize and to legislate.
The reason why he's effective as a leader is because he's lived it.
If John Lewis, as a 19, 20-year-old, wasn't doing what he did, I would not be here.
We will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today.
This is a time for action. That's what I learned from John Lewis.
There are forces in America today want to take us back, but we're not going back. We're going forward.
Lana, are you close by? Lana Jokel, come out. And Chris? Jen. And Dawn, if you would, also join us up here so that these two wonderful filmmakers can award you with the 2021 PENNEBAKER Career Achievement Award. Yeah, so, yeah, let's get in there, Chris. Yes, it's heavy, it's beautiful. You could, if you want to say just a few words, Dawn, you can. Yeah, before the interview. Don't drop it.
It's beautiful. It's a little overwhelming to be here. This is the mic. I'm like, what is this thing? So you can say, like, I'm not used to being on mic. I want to thank you all for being here. It is literally surreal to me to even be mentioned in the same same sentence with Chris Hedges, a filmmaker who literally has lit a path for so many of us in this room and around the world, and her partner, PENNEBAKER. And so I certainly do remember that you gave me the Mid-Career Award, and now it's a Career Achievement Award, so I guess I'm done. So, that's news. I really want to thank Jackie and the festival for this. I don't know if you're not a documentary filmmaker, I don't know if you can understand what this honor means. This is the Olympics, this is the Oscars, this is everything, because it's recognition by people who understand what it is that we try and do when we do this work. I wanted to just say a few words about verite filmmaking. When we were making Bobby Kennedy for president, we discovered that PENNEBAKER had this footage that he had taken of Bobby Kennedy after his brother had been killed. And we didn't just want to see the footage. I wanted to hear from PENNEBAKER what he was thinking, because when you're in those moments and capturing that kind of human emotion, I'm always curious about what the person in the room is thinking. And so we filmed PENNEBAKER. It was maybe one of the last times that he was on film, and watching him experience what he saw was such an honor for me. And because I think what people maybe, and I love that 1 minute clip that you played. And I think what might be hard to understand is, as documentary filmmakers, people think like we smoke and we wear black and we wear Tams, and we're poor, a lot of which is true. But, what we really are is optimists. And we're optimists because we are endlessly curious about the human condition, but we don't know what's going to happen. So, I always call it like the S word, scripted. Like, who couldn't make a scripted movie where you know what's going to happen and you have 23 days to shoot? Sometimes we will shoot for years and years, but we shoot with an optimism that something will happen because people are endlessly fascinating. And to me, watching the human experience and how people who are, I've seen people deal with some really, really difficult, terrible things, and literally watch them come through those through a camera. And so I understand completely and wholly what Pennebaker says when he says, like, all I'm there is witnessing, and then trying to communicate that to you. So it's kind of amazing that is my job, and that does look like a lot of work there. I do feel a little frenetic looking at that. But I also really want to thank all of you, because we are nothing without our audience, without people who join us in the journey of experiencing a film, of documenting a film, but the most important is sharing a film. Because in that sharing, I think when I was making the film about President Obama as White House photographer, that film is not about President Obama, it's about empathy. And it's about human compassion. And so having people, millions of people saw that, and it was not to elect President Obama, it was to say we can have a leader where the most important quality is empathy and kindness and caring for a person. And that's regardless of party, that's the kind of leader that we want. So without all of you, our work is not meaningful. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come out tonight. I appreciate you coming to festivals and supporting Jackie and supporting what we do, because it is terrifying. I will tell you, when those lights go down the first time, it is always really frightening because you're never sure if the audience is going to see what you saw. And so I thank you for your patience and your kindness, and your attention, and thank you for sharing this evening. It is a huge and great honor, and I really deeply appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Stay here. Okay, Julie, we're going to have a conversation now with Dawn and Julie Anderson, a wonderful filmmaker in her own right, and a member of our advisory board.
Okay, now we get to ask Dawn questions. And Jackie, you'll keep us on time, right? Okay. So Dawn, you're amazing, and thank you so much for being here tonight. When I was asked to do this conversation with Dawn, I actually met Dawn when she directed her very first film, which is called Gideon's Army. And that was 2013. Came out in 2013. And we are now 2021, only 8 years later. And Dawn has made over 10 films, which is incredible in the life of a filmmaker.
It's actually 11.
11. Thank you.
I'm kidding.
And a couple of shorts. So her growth from being a lawyer, becoming a filmmaker, making 11 films in only 8 years is astonishing. So, Dawn, I don't know how you've done this, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about some specific films and how you approach filmmaking. And I thought we would talk first about Trapped, because right now we are faced with the looming possibility that the Supreme Court may be gutting the Roe v. Wade decision. Trapped was made in 2016, came out in 2016, and if anything, it's even more relevant now than it was at the time. But can you talk to us a little bit about that making of Trapped, why you chose Trapped, and a little bit about how you found your characters and what you were up against in making that film.
I was in Jackson, Mississippi, making another film. Starting to sound like I don't know, an addict or something. But I was working on another film called Spies of Mississippi, and I like to read the local newspapers wherever I am. And I read in the Jackson, Mississippi paper that there was one abortion clinic in the entire state of Mississippi. And I thought, I'm a pro-choice person and I pay attention to the news. Why don't I know that there's only one clinic in the entire state? And so I, did what regular people do. I called them up and I said, can I come over? And they said, okay. They were kind of used to people calling and they were starting to get some press. And I went and we had a camera crew with us because we were making this other film. So I said, why don't you come with us? And if, you never know what's going to happen. And when I walked in the door, I had these two interns with me from local, two African-American students who were like 19. And we're walking in, there's this crowd of protesters outside. And we made the mistake, because I didn't know about abortion politics in the South at this point, we made the mistake of going into the front door, where the protesters swarmed, as close as they could get, yelling, screaming at us, really nasty, vile things. They would start sweetly, and then the closer we got to the door, they would be more violent and really frightening. They did yell at one point, don't let it was a boy and a girl. They said, do not let your mother do this. And I was like, your mother? They think I have a 19-year-old. So, but I just was really shocked by what I saw. And then it was so interesting because I don't know how many of you spent time in the South, but it's really beautiful. It's green and verdant, and outside there was all this ugliness, and then inside the clinic, and I had not been in an abortion clinic, it was very calm and loving and warm. And I just thought there was such a dichotomy there. So the first person I met was Dr. Willie Parker, who's an African-American former evangelical Christian. And he was living in Chicago, and he would fly from Chicago to Mississippi to do abortions because there were no doctors in the state. And he would do that on his weekends and vacations in order that there be choice in Mississippi. And I just was fascinated by him, by what was happening, by the idea that abortion was on, life support in the South, and we weren't talking about it. And so I had no money for this movie, and we just started filming, which often happens. And you don't know where it's going to take you. So because I'm a lawyer, I was really interested in the legal process. And we quickly found the lawyers who were fighting these cases, and I asked if I could follow them. And we ended up following them all the way to the Supreme Court. And that was the case, Whole Woman's Health case, that we thought was going to secure abortion rights in this country. We thought that the case was settled. And so I spent 3 years going to Texas, going to Mississippi, going to Alabama, sitting in clinics, asking women to share their stories, following the doctor, and saw just how precarious abortion rights were. And so we started in 2013. And today, Whole Woman's Health is the clinic, that is the same clinics in Texas. While we were filming, most of their clinics shut down. There were a handful of clinics in Texas. People were calling and asking if they could drink bleach. It was just one of the most horrific things I saw. So it was quite an experience. And then this year, I'm currently working on a series about the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court abortion cases so we were back in Texas, filming in the exact same clinics, and that same staff is there, and they're trying desperately to keep their doors open. They're right now turning away 85% of the patients that come to them. And most of these women are low income. They may have jobs, but they might have one child already. I can't tell you how many women told me, I would love to have another child. I can't afford the child I have. And so they were already making these horrific decisions. And to be caught in this cycle of politics is infuriating.
And so when you were making Trapped, did you ever feel like you or your crew or the people you were filming were in jeopardy because of what they were saying in front of the cameras?
Oh, yeah. Like the first, I'd made Gideon's Army, nobody cares about public defenders. And nobody cares about a first-time filmmaker. When I made Trapped, I was so naive. I went to a festival. I showed just a little bit of footage. We were trying to raise money. I showed a little bit of footage. There was an anti-choice person in the audience, unbeknownst to any of us. And that person put my name and picture and home address on an anti-choice system of internet and said, HBO filmmaker turns her evil lens to the unborn. And we started immediately getting, I got death threats, all the rest of it. But whatever I faced was nothing compared to what the doctor faced. I mean, I remember so clearly at the very last time I filmed with him, he told me that he didn't wear a vest. And so we put that in the film, and he knew what he was saying. And then 2 weeks later, in a clinic in Colorado, a number of people were shot. And I just was panicked that I had now broadcast, that I was going to broadcast that he didn't, the only doctor working in Mississippi, in several clinics in Alabama, there are 3 clinics in Alabama. He is one of 2 or 3 doctors working there. So if he dies, that's going to really shut down healthcare in that state, in 3 states, because he's going around in all these 3 states. And I called him and I said, I never do this. I don't show subjects a film before it's done because I don't want to be tempted to change anything. And I said, but I put this in and I feel like it's dangerous for you. And so if you want to see it, I will open up the film. And we already knew we were going to Sundance. So it was, and he said, they shot Dr. Taylor in the head. He said, a vest isn't going to save me. So I knew what I was saying. And I want people to know that I take that risk. So sometimes it's, whatever struggles I have in making a movie, sometimes it really hits home for you what the people who are on the front lines. Those are activists. I'm not an activist. I'm a filmmaker. Those are activists.
It's interesting because I know in our process of making documentary films, we do get to meet the most amazing people. And you met from Willie, who is an unknown doctor who's giving pretty much his life over to this sense of commitment. And then there's John Lewis, far more famous, but just as committed and accomplished, but getting a lot more attention. Can you just tell us a little bit about how that film came about?
That CNN called and said, would you like to make a film? I think they had seen Bobby Kennedy for president, and John Lewis was in that. There was a story I didn't know. John Lewis was a volunteer for Bobby Kennedy when he was in his 20s, and he organized the rally in Indianapolis in the Black community for Bobby Kennedy. It happened to be the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. And so Kennedy's white aides were saying to Kennedy, you cannot go out here. There's going to be riots. It's too dangerous for you. And a very young John Lewis said, you must speak to people today. And Kennedy listened to his 20-something aide, and he spoke. And Indianapolis is the only time that he mentioned his brother's murder in public in a speech. And Indianapolis did not have riots that night. And it was such a powerful story that I had not heard before. And he really broke down when he was talking. Bobby Kennedy was a hero to him, the same way Dr. King was. And it was a time of Great Depression for Mr. Lewis. And so I just thought, there's more stories than what we normally hear. So CNN called and said, what do you think about a John Lewis movie? And so we just got in touch with his office, and he was like, okay, it wasn't really hard. And then we just started, and it was the most remarkable year, because sometimes when you meet famous people that you admire, they ruin it for you. And so I advise you, don't meet people you really love, because sometimes they ruin it. And he was better than I could have imagined. I mean, he was along the time, Trump was president, and I would say, Mr. Lewis, I'm so worried about kids in cages, or, name the long list of civil rights abuses. And he would say, that's why we have to, and he would kind of turn the conversation to something that we could do rather than what I was doing, which was being overwhelmed and focused on what I couldn't do. And my husband started calling him my life coach. He's like, John Lewis is like your life coach. And he was. And I think he had such a strong faith, but he had a real faith in people. And that was so motivating to me. I thought John Lewis was beaten and jailed. He was in Parchman prison, naked on the floor. He told this story that the jailers would take their clothes, would hose them down, would leave them naked on the floor in cells all together. And there were young baby lawyers in like Washington and across the country. And the lawyers set up a daisy chain where they would call down to the jail and they would ask for one of the prisoners. And he said, because of those lawyers, they didn't kill us. They starved us, they beat us, they hosed us down, they froze us, but they wouldn't kill us because they thought somebody would know. And so he had a real affection for lawyers and a real appreciation of what laws could do. So we really had a great time. Mr. Lewis is very funny. He has a really wry sense of humor. He really loved joking. He loved to tease people. But the thing about John Lewis is he's incredibly calm, always calm. People around him were running around. We filmed with him on the night of the midterms, and when the House was going blue, but it was up and down. He campaigned hard for Stacey Abrams. She was losing, and we left him there. We closed the door because we had to fly out at 6 the next morning. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, John Lewis was the last one there, still in a suit and tie. Just really one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. Quiet strength, but so much fun to be around.
So he passed away the year the film came out, is that right?
He was diagnosed in December. We finished the film in November, so we had no idea that he was sick. No idea. It was hard for us to keep up with him. Tony Hardman's a great cinematographer. We had spent days following him, and Tony was like, is he going to take a break? Because I can't keep this camera up the whole time. And so it was a huge shock that he was ill, and he declined pretty rapidly. And I was really worried that he wouldn't get to see the film, because also there was just the rumor. It was February. There was the rumor of COVID. So it was Valentine's Day. I was living in California, then I flew to DC, and I was like, I'm just going to show him the film. So I just popped open my laptop, and we were in his house in DC, and it was February, and I brought him chocolate, even though he wasn't supposed to have it because he was diabetic. And we sat on his couch and we watched it together. And he just kept saying, it's so powerful. And I was like, your life is powerful. So, but that was the last time I saw him.
It just seems to me that must have been so amazing that you had the last screen moments with John Lewis, and you got the film done just in time. And I can't imagine how poignant it must have been for you to have him pass away shortly after that. It was
really hard. I've never known somebody personally who was that famous, and then who died. And so the day that he died, he was everywhere. His voice was everywhere. Clips from the film were everywhere. It was really, really hard. I could not turn on the TV. I could not. But before he died, he really wanted to go see the Black Lives Matter art installation in DC. And his chief of staff called me up, and he was like, I'm thinking about these different photographers. And we talked about the photographers. And I said, just before if he can stand up, just have him do this. Because the number one question we would get all the time was, do you support Black Lives Matter? And at one point he turned to me, he's like, why did they keep asking me that? And I said, because people don't understand what Black Lives Matter is. They think that they're violent because of, rhetoric that's anti-BLM. And so he stood there And it was our joke. It was like his last word, like, yes, I support Black Lives Matter. And the CNN executives were really kind, and they framed that photo and sent it to us. But yeah, it was, it's still hard. It's still really, because I think one of the things he did when the squad was first elected is he met with them in private. And he was one of the only people who could speak to AOC and speak to Rashida Tlaib and explain their role was different. They were no longer activists on the outside. They were the Congress. And he was mentoring them. And people don't know that he was working with them. And his passing, I think, has really left a void. There aren't that many people who can speak with his authority. So.
I know we're about to see the Breeway film, the Brianna Taylor story. One of the most interesting things about this film, and I'm very lucky that I was able to see it, is that it's really not about what happened to Brianna Taylor. It's about something kind of larger and a little bit more spiritual, I guess I would say. So can you tell us how you came up with your approach to that film? I just thought it was so unique and beautiful.
Thank you. I really, COVID was hard. Seeing all the police violence was hard. I have 2 teenagers, I guess one is 20 now, 2 boys. So that was really hard for them. My younger son didn't want to leave the house, and he finally said he was afraid to leave the house, which kind of hits you right here. You do everything to make your kids feel safe. But one thing I kept thinking about Brianna Taylor was her image was everywhere, but the story was always about her death. It wasn't about who she was as a person. She was alive, and she wasn't a symbol. She was a 26-year-old girl. So I really wanted it to be about her life and about her mother. I think has done one of the most generous and compassionate things even though it is excruciating for her to be at ceremonies about her dead 26-year-old daughter. She does it because people keep talking about gun violence and police violence. And in that is her sacrifice to do it. And I thought, if her mother will agree to do this, then we should do it. And so she did, and you'll see that she did.
You want to talk about the art exhibit and all? I mean, there's that amazing picture of the little girl in front of the painting, which I think is so stunning.
So Amy Sherrod, the American astounding portrait artist who painted Michelle Obama's portrait, Ta-Nehisi Coates was asked to curate an issue of Vanity Fair magazine. And he called up Amy Sherrod because I guess brilliant artists know each other and they can just call each other up. And he asked Amy to paint a portrait that then Vanity Fair would photograph for the cover, portrait of Brianna Taylor. And Amy had been looking for some way to use her art to further some activism. And so she painted this beautiful portrait. And so that's what the film is. The one thing we didn't include, which is important, is the portrait. So they paint this portrait. She paints this portrait, and then she's like, "What am I going to do with this painting? It's just now a photograph." So the Ford Foundation and another foundation acquired the portrait for 7 figures. Amy donated every penny of that money to a foundation for Brianna, and it is used for anti-violence scholarships in Brianna's name. So people will say her name when they get that scholarship, because Amy is a force of nature.
And how did you get involved with that film?
The great Sheila Nevins, she did the equivalent of ripping a thing out of the newspaper. She just sent me this article, and she said, "Dear Dawn, you should make a movie about this. I will pay for it. XX Sheila." And I was like, okay, that's a good idea. I mean, it was a 750-word article in the New York Times about this thing. So.
Okay, I know we have no time left, but I just want to ask you a little bit about what you're working on now.
I'm working on a series about the Supreme Court, series about Title IX.
Well, that's very much in line with everything you've done, but...
and a film about Cirque du Soleil, which we were hoping to have a clip for you. I'm sorry we don't have that. But the Cirque du Soleil film is like, it's big and bright and beautiful, and it's not just circus performers coming back. I feel like all of us are trying to decide what our post-COVID lives are going to be. Are they going to be the same? We all like have, it's like New Year's. You're going to live with that diet. You're going to see your family more. You're going to have dinner all together. You're going to cook. You're going to exercise. So the performers, I think we're thinking at a really meta level, what kind of world do they want to live in? And that's what the film's about. But you see a lot of really extraordinary, big, beautiful ideas. So it's really fun. It's a fun movie because I needed a fun movie.
It sounds amazing. We can't wait to see it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
And we look forward to Breeway.